Welcome back to Creating Dementia Solutions. Richard Pyatt here. It's a Miles for Memories program. We're talking about a number of things related to dementia. And in particular, this year, 2025, we're talking about mitigating our risk for dementia. The Lancet list, recently updated, at least in 2024, shows a number of ways that we can reduce potentially our risk for dementia. One of those ways is reducing cholesterol. We're talking about overall nutrition and diet with Jillian Bowen, a clinical nutritionist at Bronson Battle Creek. Jillian, welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I'm really interested in this idea. There is something called the Mind Diet.
Yeah.
And really there's some notion and research behind this idea that we can potentially reduce our risk for dementia using the Mind Diet as a guide?
Right. Yeah. So the Mind Diet is a mixture of the Mediterranean and the DASH diet. So those are both diets that are aimed more at reducing cardiovascular disease. And the DASH diet, it's an acronym, just kind of pieces parts out of that. And when, I'm looking at this Lancet article, it's saying reducing our LDL and the DASH diet, all of these foods, the recommendations are going to do that. So it makes sense that this diet would hopefully help reduce our incidence of dementia. Limited research done on this, but it's not going to harm you if you want to follow this. There was one study on 600 people that followed them for a 3-year period of time, and it didn't show any decrease or change in cognitive decline, but that's a kind of short period to follow. So definitely more research hopefully to be done, but just kind of the thought behind this diet is that these foods are going to decrease, our cholesterol, and if we have high cholesterol, it's been shown to correlate with those amyloid plaques in our brain, which can cause, Alzheimer's, dementia. So that's kind of like the thought behind why this diet might help. Again, not like completely, we don't completely know if for sure it will, but it wouldn't hurt to follow, right? And
Wow.
Just kind of a general healthy diet,
That was just about just what I was going to say.
Yeah.
The Mind Diet employs the primers of good nutrition, doesn't it?
Right. Yep, exactly. So it's focusing on whole grains, fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, things that everyone really, should focus on. So going to help with a lot of chronic diseases, not just dementia.
Now, the Mediterranean diet got a lot of press, but I don't know that DASH has. But did I hear you say that DASH is really sort of a derivative of the Mediterranean diet?
Yeah. So DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. So it's focusing on like leaner meats, low sodium.
High blood pressure diet.
Exactly, yeah. And so is the Mediterranean diet. That's what it's used for, like clinically. And it focuses, on lots of fish, things that they eat in the Mediterranean, right? So, and DASH is very similar, and so is the Mind. So they're all very, very similar.
So it favors fish over other proteins?
Yep. So really just wanting to limit specifically the red meat, because that's where the fat comes from, and that's, the association with dementia and the high LDL. So picking, fish at least once a week. It says once to twice a week is the recommendation in the Mind Diet. And then choosing, it says, I think 3 bean meals. I'm not really sure what that kind of really means, bean meals per week. So yeah, definitely just limiting that red meat. Not completely cutting it out, but limiting it for sure.
Okay. And that is, would you say, more of a recommendation to favor fish over meat than general nutrition, or are they pretty parallel?
It's very parallel, yeah. So just the general recommendations, I guess, like by the government, we were talking about my plate, is once a week, one portion of meat, one portion of fish a week. So yeah, very similar.
Yeah. In case you didn't hear our previous episode, the idea here is our plates have 1/4 protein, 1/4, I'm going to call it starch or carb, and then the other half of the plate is greens or vegetables of some kind. So this follows that, I'm sure, as well, right?
Exactly. Yep. It all all intertwines. Like I said, it's nothing revolutionary. It's not like one specific food that's going to help reduce your risk. It's your diet as a whole.
So, as you indicated, the DASH has had limited research, but some. But I think there's an overall notion, right, that if we try to make these adjustments, generally speaking, it has a benefit in our cognitivity.
Yeah, totally.
And this has been part of the discussion, even though the research maybe is just beginning.
Yeah. And the Lancet article specifically says, looking at your LDL, if it increases by 1 unit, it can increase your risk of dementia by 8%. I feel like that's quite a bit. Yeah. This was just looking at 3 different studies. So again, it's not like a clinical trial. It was just pulling data from other studies. But I feel like that's good enough evidence for me to want to follow some of these recommendations.
Sure. Now, you raise an interesting question in my mind as you talk about this information. In fact, you mentioned previously that the food pyramid is gone, which we all learned in school, I think, and now it's gone. Now it's the plate measurements that we were just talking about. And people will have sometimes a sense that, today they'll say such and such is bad and tomorrow it's good. Do you see those kinds of fluctuations in recommendations, or really is that just our imagination?
Yeah, some things for sure. I feel like, but it's kind of, what you're focusing on too. So, in particular, we're talking about decreasing cholesterol. So we're going to want to choose lower fat options, but some research would say that the full fat version is a little better for us, or like butter is fine, or things like that. So it's, but you can nitpick everything, I guess, and you can pick one piece out. And like I said, it's more the totality of your diet and not just focusing on one nutrient. So,
does the Mind diet, I'm wondering, focus on how food is cooked?
Yeah. So it recommends using olive oil for like a majority of the cooking, if that's what you mean, or like oven, versus
baking. Versus frying.
Yeah, baking versus frying for sure. Still, definitely you need oil, and so olive oil is a great one because it has those unsaturated fats versus the saturated fats. So saturated fats are the fats that are going to clog your arteries, so that's why they're not good for our heart, but also the study shows they're not good for dementia risk too. Recommended to use olive oil in cooking, or other unsaturated fat oils like canola, things like that.
I'm thinking about Brussels sprouts, for example. So I might bake them and put them out on a cookie sheet and take some olive oil and spread that on it. Or in the summer, when I don't want to turn the oven on,
for sure,
then I might fry them in a pan with olive oil.
Yeah.
Is there a significant difference from a nutritionist standpoint in that?
Not necessarily, no. I think it just might be the amount of oil. If you're frying something, I feel like you might tend to use a little more oil. So that's kind of where, it's going to increase the calories, increase the fats.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably true. If I'm thinking about the cookie sheet and I'm drizzling, very carefully.
Yeah.
But
just kind of,
on the pan, you're going to pour it in the pan, and there's probably going to be more there.
Yeah.
Of course, frying is a little maybe more stark if something's breaded or something of that nature. So now we're talking about a real difference, right?
Yeah. So when I'm really promoting fish a lot, and because I love fish, but if I tell patients to eat fish, they're like, I only eat, fried fish,
Yes.
right? I don't know. I would argue maybe that's okay though, because you're actually eating fish versus like a higher fat, protein. But
and a person's individual situation may come into play. For example, if someone is diabetic, then you're probably going to tell them not to have fried.
Exactly. Yep. And I know if you really have bad heart disease, obviously I'm going to caution it as well. But if you're just kind of general healthy population, moderation for sure. Yeah.
All right, here's the $64,000 question. If I'm on the Mind diet and I'm trying to be healthier overall, can I have dessert?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can, for sure. Everything in moderation, I believe. But, in relation to like cholesterol, what we're talking about,
Yeah.
those simple carbohydrates have been shown to increase our LDL. So I'm talking, like bakery items, just pure table sugar, and the sugar sweetened beverages. We do want to limit it because there is evidence that it can increase those cholesterol levels.
I was having lunch with someone the other day and they ordered coffee.
Yeah.
And they brought, what looked like a small container of sugar in it. And she took the spoon and there was one heaping helping in the coffee. Oh, maybe a little more. And then another heaping helping into the coffee. Wow.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sugar in there.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the view for we lay people is, oh, that's not much.
Yeah.
That's a lot, isn't it?
For sure, yeah, it adds up. If you were to kind of see it like measured out, you might be a little shocked, but yeah, every now and then again, I think it's fine, but we don't want to be drinking Mountain Dew as our main source of hydration. There's a lot of different options these days. There's like healthier for you sodas. There's a bunch of different sparkling waters. We can do better.
The soda companies have really been trying to expand the offerings.
Definitely.
Probably for this reason, because folks like you are telling us, hey, watch the sugar.
Yep, it can, again, increase your cholesterol, diabetes, heart disease, renal disease, everything.
And we're trying to be sure about our mind health as well.
Yeah.
So that, of course, is a concern.
Yep.
So with the mind diet, is that customized for a person depending on their goals, their health goals, I suppose, is the question, because not everybody can live on the same amount of calories.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. It's definitely flexible. They give recommended amounts, but they don't really give specific foods, so you can tailor it to what you like, how much you may need, depending on your activity level. If you're more active, and I was going to touch on that, I think you guys might do an exercise episode, but exercise really can help to increase our HDL above all else, so it in turn can decrease our LDL. Recommended 120 to 150 minutes per week. Doesn't have to be a marathon, just get some moderate intensity, get a little breathy. Don't have to be completely breathless the whole time, but that can really help.
So elevating the heart rate.
For sure. Yeah.
So does that really make a difference, and how immediate is that? If someone does 10 minutes of elevated heart rate, what does that do for us?
Yeah, so I think it makes a difference. I think a good thing about cholesterol is it's measurable, right? So we can get kind of where we get our labs drawn, we can see where we are. We can make these interventions for a couple of months. Your physician's going to give you probably a time frame that they want to see how these interventions are working for you. Then you can get your blood drawn again and see, if it helps. And I think that can be pretty motivating too. If you see your levels come down or the HDL come up, you'd be like, wow, I'm making a difference.
Look what happened.
Yeah.
That's right. So is there a misconception among folks that they have to go out and, run 16 miles or something and then they make a difference?
Yeah, I think so. People are extreme, I think, just by nature. And so they think, you have to work out every single day, like for an hour plus.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But really, there's been studies that if you just work out 2 days, so just on the weekend, if that's when you only have time, I know I'm a mother of 2 young children, that's really when I only have time.
Sure.
There have been studies that show that can be, very, very health protective, cardiovascular, dementia, LDL, things like that. So
you made a comment before we were recording, and I want to allude to that. You made a remark that exercise could be even more impactful than nutrition and the way we eat and what we eat.
For sure. I think, the studies, I read studies every day, and there's just so many studies on movement and how it can be healthy for us and all these chronic diseases. And, I think diet plays a portion, but I think a lot of people, more so when they're starting like a health journey, they might focus more like on the diet piece, but I think you also need that exercise piece. And, like I said, it doesn't have to be anything crazy to start off with, but I think, as Americans as a whole, we just need to move more.
All right. Thank you for that. Although it actually is, it takes a little pressure off to know we don't have to run a marathon right away.
For sure, yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And the Mind Diet, we'll link the Mind Diet in the show notes for this episode so that you can click through and have a look at what that really means. Very interesting, Jillian Bowen. Thank you, clinical nutritionist at Bronson Battle Creek. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
So you heard Jillian say movement. Miles for Memories, right there in the mission. Movement programming research as we talk about dementia and supports therein. milesformemories.org is the website. There's also a lot of other information there, including some really remarkable technology that's also out that assists folks with dementia and those who are caring for them. Have a look at the website and see what I'm talking about. And click the like on the Facebook page for Miles for Memories so you're alerted when these episodes come available. Creating Dementia Solutions from Miles for Memories. Richard Pyatt here. Take care.